The medieval era was a strange time compared with today's modern world. Today, we're taking a look at the top 15 most unusual medieval inventions. Number 15. Animal court. Life in medieval times could be tough, and this didn't just apply to humans. Like their two-legged owners, all manner of animal, from livestock to insects, were put on trial if suspected of breaking the law. There are records of at least 85 animal trials that took place during the Middle Ages. In the fall of 1457, villagers in Savigny, France, witnessed a sow and 6 piglets attack and kill a 5-year-old boy. Today, the animals would be summarily killed, but errant 15th century French pigs went to court. And it wasn't for a show trial. This was the real deal, equipped with a judge, 2 prosecutors, 8 witnesses, and a defense attorney for the accused swine. Witness testimony proved beyond reasonable doubt that the sow had killed the child. As crazy as it all sounds, the trials appear to have used applied logic in determining an animal's guilt or innocence. Judges routinely considered animals' personal circumstances before making a legal decision. Take the piglets we're talking about. The judge deemed them innocent, not only on technical grounds — no witnesses came forth to confirm that the piglets attacked — but also because the pigs were immature and thus poorly positioned to make clear choices. Could an animal court make a comeback? Let us know in the comments below. Number 4. Quicklime. Also known as calcium oxide, quicklime is made from heating limestone in a kiln. Typically stored in large throwable pots, it was an effective weapon in naval warfare. When the pots are thrown with force and shatter on impact, the powder rises in the air and enters the enemy's eyes and irritates them so greatly, nearly blinded, they can't see. This situation is very dangerous in naval warfare because fighting men in such a war see themselves threatened with death from every quarter. It's much easier to hit a ship-sinking obstacle or fall overboard if your vision is suddenly and very painfully impaired. On contact with a body of water, quicklime combusts, igniting the fluid compound, which was lighter than water, so stayed both afloat and burning despite attempts to put it out. In the days before modern weapons technology, the psychological effect of such a weapon was as devastating as its physical effects. Number 13. Psychedelic Bread. Summer was a particularly difficult time for villagers as they were running out of grain, but the new crop wasn't ready to be harvested, so they often have to use old rye to make bread. Unfortunately, stored rye was frequently infected with ergot, a fungus with an LSD-like quality that caused hallucinations, gangrene, and in extreme cases, death. A purple talon-like outgrowth is commonly found issuing from the ear of rye grains, and to a lesser extent related cereals like wheat and barley. The French thought it was redolent of a rooster's spur, hence its name, which was descended from argot, the French old term for a cockspur. Each of these ergot kernels contained a number of alkaloids harmful to humans and animals. When ergot-infected grain is milled into flour and consumed, a host of troubles arise: convulsions and seizures, vivid hallucinations, often of demons or animals, a restriction of blood flow to the extremities followed by a falling off of gangrenous limbs. In many cases, hallucinations seize upon actual prickling or burning sensations arising from the loss of blood flow, leading to the sufferer believing he is crawling with insects or engulfed in flames. Number 12. LongToed Shoes. And you thought designer kicks today were impractical. From the 1330s onward, men considered long-toed shoes to be the height of fashion. By the late 14th century, toes were so long they had to be reinforced with wool, moss, or whalebone. Nobles had to tie the ends to their leggings in order to get around, and crusaders had to cut off the tips of their shoes in order to be able to run away from the enemy. The lords, and to a lesser extent ladies, of 15th century Europe wore these shoes almost exclusively for over a century. They didn't even stay pointy by themselves. Poulains, the name for these fashion crimes like babies or unescorted bosoms, could not support themselves. In order to keep the tips erect, medieval shoemakers stuffed them with soft organic material, often moss, hair, or wool. Poulains stand out even more because medieval fashion was often governed by clean lines and practical, chaste minimalism. The kind of pragmatic approach you might need if you're wielding a sword at 3:30 and have a fancy dinner party to attend at 6. Just be happy you're not wearing these monstrosities today. Number 11. A 3-person toilet. One might not consider a toilet rare, but one 12th century example fits the bill. Around 900 years ago, somebody took an axe and hacked 3 holes into a large oak plank, This three-person toilet seat was then positioned over a cesspit near the Thames in London, England. Back in the day, it stood behind and probably served a building that was located at the modern-day Ludgate Hill. Researchers managed to track down some of the names of the people who lived and worked at the building, which contained a mixture of homes and businesses. Among the names were Cassandra de Flett and her husband John, a cap maker. The building itself was called Helle when the loo was in use. Adventurous scientists decided to sit on the seat, which was discovered in the 1980s. Although they found the axe-hewn holes comfortable, personal space was an issue. The holes were so close together and 3 people using the facilities would have sat shoulder to shoulder. The real question is, why? Why not cut one board into 3 and hack a toilet seat into each? Is efficiency that much more important than comfort when it comes to bathroom duties? Number 10. The Judas Cradle. The Judas Cradle was a pyramid-shaped spike that a victim would be forced to sit on so that it penetrated their anus. The Spanish donkey used a similar principle, but victims would straddle a wedge-shaped board with a pointed top. The Judas Cradle began to be used during the 16th century in Spain, after the institution of the Inquisition was established in the country. Thus, it was during the late medieval times that the device was most commonly used. Although mostly used for religious purposes, it was also used against the political opponents of the time. Another device very similar to the Judas Cradle was also in vogue in Prussia, but its purpose was to discipline the wayward soldiers. This particular device was simply known as horse and was specifically designed to cause damage to the genitals. Torturers could strap weights to the feet of their victims to increase the suffering. Number 9. Corpse medicine. King Charles II of England created a tonic from powdered skull and alcohol, known as the King's Drops. Hangmen and official executioners usually processed the bodies of executed criminals and slain enemies, grinding up the bones and skull and rendering the fat. Medieval patients rubbed rendered human fat on arthritic joints or made it into salves for gout. Apothecaries carried items such as powdered mummies, ground skull, and jars of Uxumia hominis, the name for the fat. Uzni, a moss that grows in graveyards among other places, was usually added to the medicines. While it's unlikely that consuming cadavers helped anyone, the Uzni at least would have helped boost the patient's immune system, as modern herbalists recommend it today for that reason. We're constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Bloodletting in accordance with the zodiac. Bloodletting was a common medical practice in the Middle Ages, which was meant to let bad blood out of the body. Medieval Europeans were so into it, they had texts advising which saints' days were best for bloodletting, and charts showing which part of the body were best to bleed according to the zodiac. It's just plain bad for you. Ask George Washington. On December 13, 1799, George Washington awoke with a bad sore throat and began to decline rapidly. A proponent of bloodletting, he asked to be bled the next day. Physicians drained an estimated 5 to 7 pints in less than 16 hours. Despite their best efforts, Washington died on December 17th, leading to speculation that excessive blood loss contributed to his demise. Bloodletting has also been implicated in the death of Charles II, who was bled from the arm and neck after suffering a seizure in 1685. By the late 1800s, new treatments and technologies had largely edged out bloodletting, and studies by prominent physicians began to discredit the practice. Number 7. The gun shield. The gun shield was exactly what its name would suggest. It was a shield with a breech-loading matchlock pistol at its center, with a small square window about the barrel as an observation port. The shield is believed to have been used by the personal bodyguard of Henry VIII around 1544 to 1547. Although many examples of gun shields have been found in England, they are thought to be of Italian origin and were offered to King Henry VIII in a letter from the Italian painter Giovan Battista. In this letter, they are described as several round shields and arm pieces with guns inside them that fire upon the enemy and pierce any armor. King Henry ordered 100 to be made for his royal guards. There are 2 variants of the gun shield. One is Italian manufactured and one British. The Italian is of smaller caliber and lighter, and is assumed the English version was meant to be used on ships, while the Italian was meant to be handheld. Number 6. The Urumi. The Urumi was a flexible, long sword made from either steel or brass and was often treated as a metal whip. It was often made up of multiple fine metal blades attached to a single handle. and in some cases there could be as many as 30 blades in one sword. The weapon originated in the southern states of India, being known as far back as the Mauryan Empire. While being deadly to the opponent, it was also very dangerous to the wielder. In medieval India, only the most well-trained Rajput warriors could practice with the Urumi, as it required perfect coordination, concentration, and agility. The wielders would be taught to follow and control the momentum of the weapon, and the techniques included spins and other agile moves. These spins made the weapon well-suited to fight against multiple opponents at once. In its simplest form, the Urumi consists of a long strip of metal attached to a handle, with a thumb guard and a knuckle guard. Due to the Urumi's whip-like design, it can be rolled up when not in use. This allows it to be easily carried around during travels or concealed. In addition, this weapon has often been worn as a belt. Number 5. The Lantern Shield. The Lantern Shield has been called the Swiss Army knife of weapons, as it housed many items in one shield. It was a small shield in the shape of a buckler, and its defining feature was a hook on one which could hang a lantern. This feature was intended to blind the opponent in battles fought in the dark. More elaborate examples of the lantern shield could include gauntlets, spikes, sword blades, as well as dimmer for the lantern. Fencing manuals from the 16th and 17th centuries integrated a lantern into the lessons of the swordman, using it to parry and blind. In general, it's believed that the lantern shield was never actually used in combat, but rather for patrolling Italian city streets at night. The effectiveness of the lantern shield in real combat is questionable, but in the context of walking around a dangerous city at night, it does warrant some interesting conclusions. First off, it was probably very ominous looking, and any would-be robber was probably inclined to just move on to the next victim. And if a combative situation arose, the whole contraption was probably reasonably effective at staving off injury, much in the same way as a porcupine does. The addition of the lantern was also a strong deterrent against attack, because any nighttime robber would just avoid the illumination and exposure. So as a real weapon, it was probably not very good, but as a deterrent, it was probably reasonably effective. Any robber or ruffian seeing someone carrying this thing would probably just move on to the next victim. Number 4. Medieval Psychiatry. Although psychiatry is a very young field, the medieval kind was very, very brutal. A suggested treatment regimen for the mentally ill included tying up the arms and legs, putting their feet in salt water, and pulling their hair and nose while squeezing the toes and fingers tightly. As if those were not harsh enough, the patient would often have pigs squealing in their ears. But it doesn't end here. Other regimens including putting a feather or a straw in the patient's nose to cause a sneeze before burning human hair under the nose, and for some odd reason, the back of the head is shaved. Number 3. Stomach pain elixir. This potion, supposedly invented by St. Paul, was to be drunk. It has an extensive list of ingredients: licorice, sage, willow, roses, fennel, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, cormorant blood, mandrake, dragon's blood, and 3 kinds of pepper. What purposes might such ingredients have? Starting with licorice, it was good for the chest and was used to treat coughs and bronchitis. Sage was thought to improve blood flow to the brain and help with memory. Willow contains salicylic acid, a component for aspirin. And then fennel, cinnamon, and ginger are carminatives that relieve the intestinal gases and a colicky stomach. Cormorant blood, or that of any other warm-blooded creature, adds iron for anemia. Mandrake, although poisonous, acts like a sleeping pill if used in small doses. And finally, we have dragon's blood, which is not blood at all, and certainly didn't originate from a giant fire-breathing lizard. It is, however, the bright red resin of the tree Dracaena draco, native to Morocco, Cape Verde, and the Canary Islands. Modern research has shown that it has antiseptic, antibiotic, antiviral, and wound-healing properties, and it's still used in some parts of the world to treat dysentery. Number 2. Using snail slime for burns. This was a simple, do-it-yourself remedy anyone could do to reduce blistering and pain. Simply take a live snail and rub its slime against the affected area and it'll heal. Modern research has shown that snail slime contains antioxidants, antiseptic, anesthetic, anti-irritant, anti-inflammatory, antibiotic, and antiviral properties, as well as collagen and elastin, vital for skin repair. Number 1. The Pillory. A pillory is a set of 2 parallel wooden boards clasped together, with holes for the neck and wrists. When opened, the victim places his or her head and arms through the holes. Then the pillory is closed, and the victim can't possibly escape. The pillory itself does no harm to the victim, though it's certainly not comfortable. The entire apparatus was usually placed on a stage in a public place. The entire point was to humiliate and shame the victim for his or her crimes. The crowd would throw objects at the victim, such as rotten vegetables, dead animals, or feces. Stones and other blunt objects were thrown as well, which could result in painful injuries or death. While a sentence in the pillory often only lasted an hour or two, usually during the busiest times of day, its effect really depended on the nature of the crime and the mood of the crowd. 4 Englishmen who had falsely accused others of crimes to get their reward, sending innocents to the hangman's noose, were beaten to death by the crowd. Others who won the crowd's favor by refusing to pay unjust taxes or mocking government officials were showered with flowers or rescued from the pillory outright. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.